come down to Kittredge with us again.
It would do and then I say
Good, how are you? Nice to see you everywhere.
loud voice, right? You show up and you have voice. Get a better opportunity.
Saying, come down to Kittredge and you're going to get rid
Aaron,
There's children.
Kids here.
Are you babysitting?
You have customers, I think. Either that or you have constituents or interested.
Did you bring your parents with you?
Yeah.
Great, Daniel and Meg, come on in. I'm gonna give you updates. That's all right. Yep. All right.
Which one can I do? I will do
This is Daniel and Meg. Hey, Carl, they're gonna play with you guys. You're gonna show them around the pre-K room, okay? Come on up, I'll make sure it's open.
All right, so we'll get started. I'm really only going to introduce the team that's here tonight and give a little bit of an idea about what will happen in the next hour and a half or so. So I'm Lori Kasda. I am fortunate to be the superintendent here in Central Berkshire, and I'm very fortunate to be an active part of looking at a long-term solution for Wahconah Regional High School. Part of the reason I'm so fortunate is I work with an amazing group of people, and recently that group has gotten larger as we brought on expertise from our owner's project manager who helps to guide us through this process. It is somewhat of a complex process because it's overseen by the Mass School Building Authority. They come to the table and they provide a percentage of the funding, so they also provide some requirements that we have to meet. And we're very fortunate that John Benzinger and Joe Caldwell from Skanska, who are our owner's project managers, are very well versed in the requirements and have helped to guide myself, our assistant superintendent, Melissa Falkowski, and our entire school building committee, which is led by Tom Callahan, the retired principal from Wahconah, and Sean Armacost, our school committee chair, through this process. So Dale will speak a little bit about their role, and he will speak about the technical requirements of the MSBA. So that's an important part. They do come to the table with funds, but they also come to the table with requirements and things we need to do. Additionally, more recently, we have had the fortune of partnering with DRA, who is our design team, and we have members of that team here, and Carl will talk about their role and what they've been working with us on. If DRA and Skanska sound familiar to you as owners, project managers, and as a design team, they were the same team that worked on the Taconic project and came with rave reviews from the team over in Pittsfield. So we're very lucky. Tonight is pretty much about visioning what you see as needs for a future building or renovation of the current building, educationally and structurally. The only thing before we get started I'll do quickly is I do see some familiar faces in the audience who are members of the school building committee. If after tonight you want more information or you want to contribute more information, the school building committee meets regularly, and Skanska and DRA are at those meetings, and it's when we get into the real substance of things that we need to get done for MSBA. Decisions are made, and they are public meetings, and you're welcome to attend. If you can't attend, it's, I think, helpful to know who's representing you in your community. So if our members of the school building committee who are here don't mind just sharing their name and the community they represent, yeah, Jan. She's looking back. She's getting started.
Hi, I'm Jan Paxton-Huebner, and I'm from Washington, and I've been a long-time resident, and all of my children went to this wonderful school, and to Nesicus, and to Wahconah. So I'm back on building committee. I was on this one for 5 years.
And I'm Bill Mulholland. I'm representing Berkshire Community College, retired, and in the town of Becket. And I'm a graduate of Becket Consolidated School in class of 64.
if you do want to see the full building committee is listed on the website along with a bunch of other resources, but Dale will take it from here.
Well, again, I'm Dale Powell-Skanska, John Messer, Rodeo Camp. So tonight we're going to talk about, basically we're in a feasibility study. MSBA requires us to go through this process. Carl will talk more about details, but there's really three main pieces. One is the preliminary design program. So during this process, which we're in right now, spring 2018, we look at the educational program, the way the school is, the education program, the way it is today, and the way it'll look in the future. And Carl will talk about more about the process they go through. The big thing too is the existing condition survey. What that is Carl and his team, and when I say the team, there's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, all these different engineers that go through the existing high school to look at what's there today, so they come back and report. And then also alternates. With the MSBA, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, is your tax dollars coming back, so it's a good thing that they're supporting you and you're your partner. But part of this, they also require us to look at three things. We have to look at just what I call a status quo, look at the building the way it is today, and just do a large maintenance program. We have to do that as a benchmark. We also look at putting additions around the building, renovation addition, that is required part of this program. And the third option that requires new. We have to look at a new building. And Carl will talk more about that. So the alternates that we see up there could be different additions, renovations, we go through all this process. So we'll get more into that. After that process, we go into what's called the PSR phase, Preferred Schematic Report. And again, fall of 2018, so end of this year. Again, we take the educational plan, we fine tune it, we evaluate the alternates. Again, we'll come back to the community, keep educating you and showing you what we've been doing. And again, we'll have a process of tonight. And the goal that we come down with one option. So end of this year, we'll have one preferred option, it's called. So the whole process we go through, we'll start with 8, 10, 12, we'll narrow down to one. Then what happens, it goes to the MSBA. They also, their partner, there's a lot of meetings in between here, they're always checking in. So the winter of 2018, we're going to have a scope, a budget, and a schedule. There's probably more questions tonight than we have answers. However, as we go through this year, we're going to fine tune all this data and bring it back. So the schedule for winter, we're looking at the MSBA board meeting of April of next year, 2019. So again, at that point in time, here's the scope, whatever it is, we don't know. The budget, we'll give you the budget, we're going to break it down by the different towns, so each and every town will see what their share is. And then also the schedule, so every option is going to have a different schedule. What happens after the board meeting in April 2019, you have 120 days to work with the project. So that brings us to the spring of 2018. So this is what they call a feasibility study, the schematic design phase. So as again, you can see there's a lot of information in here, and Carl's going to kind of dig into it a little bit. So with that being said,
Thanks, Al. So again, I'm Carl Franceschi with PRA. We're honored to be part of this project again. We just want to share with you briefly, this is what we do as an architecture firm, is design educational facilities. We've done a lot of schools just in the last 14 years there, including a couple nearby. In Springfield, we did the new Putnam Academy. That's a large vocational school, replacing the existing building on that site. And in Pittsfield, as was mentioned, that's the rendering of the kind. But if you drive by, it almost looks like that today. It's getting close. It's a couple months away from being occupied. What we see is that the key issues here that we want to help we want your help in resolving too as we move forward. The big question is going to be new construction or renovation of the existing building. If you came here tonight looking for their answers, we don't have that answer yet. But that's certainly a key question that we're driving at. We're trying to develop as much information to help answer that as possible. We want to bring the building up to support Wahconah's 21st century learning methodologies. The school is being as progressive as it can be within the confines of the existing building. Which is great to see in the sense that they're already making the educational changes in how they teach and learn there. We want to try and bring the building up to the same standards. A couple of challenges. The enrollment, as I'm sure a lot of you know, in Berkshire County in general, but for Wahconah specifically, is declining. And in partnering with the state on this project, there's already been an agreement as to what the future enrollment will be for Wahconah in terms of at least a design goal. And it's 460 students, which is less than the 540 students that are there today. So that is a little bit of a challenge. That, the project's going to take a couple of years, whatever form it takes. But that first day, first year, it might be a little tight in there if there's still 500 something students. That's one of the challenges that we have, and also just in designing smaller high schools, and at 460 students, it is on the smaller side of high schools. As we said, it forces us all to be creative and think about getting multiple use out of spaces, like this space we're in right now. It's a cafeteria and it's also the auditorium. That kind of double use in space, you got to be looking for opportunities like that throughout the program. And then we want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that whatever happens there's going to be construction going on next to occupancy. Certainly if we renovate the building, we're not going to be able to get all the kids out of the school and have an empty building and turn over to the contractor to renovate. It's probably going to be done in phases, and we've got to be aware of that and use that in analyzing the options. And even if we build new adjacent to the school, there'll be some disruption of the existing school that we have to take into account. And we always want to make sure, obviously, that it's safe and things are as segregated as possible. But it is an issue in this kind of project. And we want to involve the community in whatever it is decided. That's always important, but we don't want to lose sight of that either. So we're focusing on this first phase of the feasibility study, which Dale mentioned is called the preliminary design program. The state has a very good process. We find that it forces us to consider, the educational aspects of this project before we start designing anything. We don't want to come in with preconceptions as to what the solution will be until we've looked at the educational plan. And this really comes from the district themselves. We have some assistants there, and we have educational consultants who can help, and we can bring our experience from other projects and so forth, but it really comes from within, and we'll share with you a little bit of how that's developing. As Dale said, a big part of this first phase is evaluating existing conditions so that we can factor that into any kinds of solutions, whether it's renovation or what the value is to fix what's there today. And then this first phase, we're developing alternatives. Again, we're not narrowing the list of options, we're widening the list right now at this point in time. And that educational plan covers a host of aspects of the school. I won't go through all of that, but again, this is sort of a template that the state requires that the district think about all these things before embarking on a construction project. And what they're looking for, as was mentioned, they want to understand what's the existing program like, and what's the vision, what's the proposed program in each of those areas that was listed in the previous slide. And they want to make sure that this is done through a process of collaboration, that it's not just the superintendent or the administration or the school committee that go off by themselves. They want to make sure that we involve a lot of folks like yourself. And that it basically means that, in a narrative form. So again, we're not designing it in a narrative form, talking about the curriculum and the philosophy of the school. One way to get there that does some of those things of collaborating with a wide group of stakeholders is this visioning process. This occurred about a month ago. We had a couple of full-day sessions where we bring in an educational consultant who acts as a facilitator. We'll do a little bit of that tonight in the sense of there's a little bit of sharing of information, and there's breaking up into smaller groups and having a discussion and coming back together. That's kind of the format for tonight as well. But that, it had community members, it had students, it had teachers, administrators, parents, school committee members. I think we had about 40 people participate in these day-long sessions. It was very useful, and it helped, enumerate a lot of the topics that are required to be addressed here. In addition, we've also had programming sessions too, where our educational consultant and planners, I should mention Paul Moore's with us. That's what Paul does full-time for us. Because we're designing schools virtually full-time, we have people like Paul who help us plan and program educational facilities. We sit down with the principal, the administration, and the key teachers in every department to get their needs and their understanding of what's working for them today and what they'd like to see in the future as well. And again, the process is kind of in this form where it starts with the educational plan before we get down to that single solution. And we We want to develop a lot of options. We want to develop a lot of objective criteria to evaluate those options. So it doesn't become just kind of an emotional response. I really like this solution, or, I thought from the beginning we should renovate the school. We want to understand, a little bit deeper than that. Why is that the best option? And try to use some criteria to judge that. So here's some of the things that came out of the visioning sessions in a couple different categories. As far as educational issues go, these are some of the key things that the vision for the school, again, whether it's renovated or new, needs to address. It has to engage students. The curriculum and the building itself both need to be such that students are engaged, that they want to come to school, they want to learn, and teachers want to come and learn, and it's that sort of an environment. That it continues to emphasize what are called 21st century skills. These are kind of maybe today's version of what used to be just the 3 R's or something. Now, students need to be prepared for a future that we don't even know what exists. I think I don't have the exact statistics, but they're going to be working in jobs that don't even exist today, and that we can't even envision. But to be prepared for that, they need to be, creative. They need to be able to communicate, to collaborate, working in small groups, and have critical thinking skills, so they become lifelong learners that can be flexible and adjust to that future that we can't even envision right now. And you might know this acronym. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. Again, those are very important skills in the kind of technological environment that we'll all, future that we'll all be dealing with. And one way to get there educationally is project-based learning. That was another aspect that came out of the visioning sessions. In other words, doing what these kids are doing, perhaps collaborating to problem solve a relevant kind of real world problem and apply things in the curriculum to problem solving. It's a way of engaging students. It's a way of doing some of these other things, 21st century skills, in an application way. And then as far as the facilities go, the physical school itself, we did look at some examples of what might be called 21st century schools and extracted some important information from them. One of which is we need to make sure we have flexible furniture. Believe it or not, that makes a tremendous difference, not only in the classroom, in a room like this as well. Having furniture, if the space is going to do double duty, the furniture also has to do triple duty sometimes and be flexible so students can face the front of it and listen to a teacher lecture for a bit, but then can turn around and collaborate with others, or maybe push their tables, the desk together, things like that. It's important to support the kind of learning we're talking about. There was certainly an emphasis on safety and security brought up, and one other thing that may seem kind of small, but having teacher planning centers is a kind of a different way of approaching teachers' relationship to the building, in the sense that right now at Wahconah and a lot of schools, teachers kind of own a classroom. They teach, in that space all day long, and when they're not teaching, they're off period, they're in that same space doing their planning. It's kind of an isolated existence. It's not a way to collaborate with, and it's also not the most efficient use of the space. The teacher doesn't need, a full classroom to do his or her planning. And so a teacher planning center, if it's properly equipped and strategically located, can encourage some of these other aspects that we want to happen in the school. Teachers can collaborate with other teachers. They can get out of their classroom and have more contact with students and be more available to students and so forth. So those are some of the facilities issues that came out. And then one of the other things we wanted to touch on is what's called learning modalities or styles of learning. Again, just to clarify that this will feed into the educational plan. That again, as opposed to lecturing, which was seen as the least effective way for teaching and learning to happen, it was by consensus that these kinds of project-based learning, small group collaboration, and also not losing sight of social and emotional learning happening were the key learning styles that need to be emphasized going forward. So one other tool that was used is this trend. It's called the map. It's kind of a scale that goes from most traditional schools to sort of most forward-looking schools. And through a series of questions in small groups, collectively we arrived at, where is Wahconah today and where does it want to be? And today, educationally, it's a little bit more than traditional. It is forward-looking somewhat. The facility, though, is very traditional. If you look at the floor plan, those who know the building, it hasn't changed much since 1960. The building's probably still be able to find your way around it. The rooms are all in the same place and never changed much. But you can see again by consensus where people want the school to be, both educational and from a facilities point, it is pretty progressive. So we want to make sure that first the education plan addresses that, and obviously whatever physical developments come out of it, again, whether it's new or renovated, can support that. And then we did get into some diagrams near the ends of the visiting sessions to try to say, okay, how do we think about making this a physical school? And again, without planning, actual floor plans, we translate the spaces into these little bubbles and then try to organize them and figure out what wants to be adjacent to what, how does the school want to be organized. And even though these aren't, in the shape necessarily of the rooms in the final analysis, one of the things you'll notice is it's not like the existing building where rooms are sprung out along a corridor. The classrooms, these blue circles, and green and yellow, they're grouped in clusters and broken down into smaller learning communities. So the entire 460 students are broken down into 3 or maybe 4 learning communities where, one, the teachers get to know those students a little better. The students themselves are kind of in a smaller group. And it supports interdisciplinary learning and also supports that project-based learning as well by doing that. And we make sure that there's a teacher planning center in each one of these. And then there's also some open, unassigned collaborative space too to support those kind of activities. And then the other major point to take away from this diagram is that there's kind of an academic side of the school and a more public side, you might say, where the larger spaces of the auditorium, the gym, the cafeteria are more accessible to the community, more available after hours and weekends, and could easily be closed off from the rest of the school too at those times. And we have since kind of developed that diagram a little bit more so that, and we're working on this right now with the education plan. This is what a classroom cluster might contain, and we'll refine this even more, but a variety of classroom sizes, some large, some small, science labs that are distributed, one perhaps in each cluster as opposed to all the science labs being together. As we said, it's important to have a teacher planning center with each group, and then some open collaborative space too. And if we take those clusters and kind of put them together to make an academic side of the building, they might be clustered around what is called now the Learning Commons, which is a sort of a modern update of the library, the media center. Because libraries today, as you might anticipate, don't need a lot of books. They need space and tables and a variety of resources for students to collaborate, to work on projects, to have access to information, and to a librarian and coach kind of. But they can really support the classrooms more. They become a place, in addition to this breakout space for cluster, this becomes a larger, you might say, breakout space if it's in close proximity to the classrooms. And then on the other side of the building, so to speak, if you think of this as the building, like again, those larger spaces might be grouped around what is, traditionally called a cafeteria, but if you think of it again as being multi-purpose, a student commons is probably a better name for it because it will be used before school, after school, during school, not just for eating lunch. And also not to lose sight of a good control that there is a main entrance, that other entrances can be blocked during the day, and all visitors are directed into a control point immediately adjacent to the administration. We're also working on this form, which is a state requirement. This space summary form is part of the educational planning, in that we need to list every space in the building that currently exists and what's proposed. And so the way the form works is that we list the numbers and sizes of spaces that currently exist, and in the center here we list the number and sizes of what's proposed, and in this right-hand column is what the state uses as kind of their template to compare against, because they need to sort of keep a cap on cost, and the amount of space translates obviously directly into cost for the most part. And so they do use that to measure against certain things. And we'll get into this concept later down the line about what's eligible for reimbursement and what may not be. For instance, one that you may be familiar with at Wahconah is it has a reasonably large auditorium, 550 seats, I think it is, which is about as many students as there are in the building right now. Well, in the MSBA's guidelines for high schools of various sizes, they put a cap on what they will reimburse for at 2/3 of the enrollment. So we can build an auditorium for 500 or 460 or in that range, but some of that may not be eligible for reimbursement. So it affects the cost that the district will have to pay out, and doesn't necessarily preclude us from designing it and building it. And there's a few other things like that that will come up along the way. Then just to mention briefly what's going on with existing condition analysis, as Taylor mentioned, our team of architects and engineers has been going through the building, inside and out. We do look at the fields and the pavement and some parking and so forth as well. We look at all these aspects of the building. And then we look at it kind of from a nuts and bolts point of view on one hand, but we also look at it from a programmatic point of view too. Are the spaces, appropriately sized? Are they located, adjacent to the things that they want to be adjacent to and so forth? And identify those issues as well. Here's some, for those who haven't been there in a while, as I say, the school hasn't changed much, even though it's been reasonably well maintained. Unfortunately, it's, over 50 years old, and there's some things that are just tough to keep up with. The windows are originally just single pane windows. There's been some storm windows put in to help with, thermal insulation. Some masonry is failing a little bit. There are some portable classrooms in use there that those have really outlived their lifespan as well. Going around the building, there's accessibility issues that would need to get addressed in case of a renovation. There's some hazardous materials again in a renovation that would have to be removed, the old floor tiles, some of those kinds of things as well. So we're identifying all this, preparing a report, and ultimately we'll translate it into dollars as to what would it cost to fix these things, without even considering, changing the educational configuration of the school, just what would it cost to fix the nuts and bolts kinds of things. And this quote kind of summarizes things well too, that even though it's been well maintained, a lot of the systems, a lot of the materials are at the end of their useful life. And it's just getting more expensive and harder to maintain going forward. So one thing to keep in mind is we like to say that there really isn't, or there, if you want to call it a do-nothing option, it's not, it doesn't cost you nothing. It's still going to cost you something in the next 5 to 10 years to take care of the building. And we'll try to put a number on this cost for you. And then programmatically, this is the kind of analysis we do. This is a floor plan of the building. The entrances are here. There's the gym, there's the auditorium, and you have those long corridors with classrooms on either side. The colors here indicate we compare the existing sizes of the classes, of the spaces, to best practices and/or state standards. And if it falls below the state standard, it shows up as red. If it's okay, it shows up as green. And if it's marginal, like just a little bit below state standard, it shows up as yellow. So you can see a lot of spaces, particularly science classrooms, are below standard, unfortunately. There, some spaces, like I mentioned, the auditorium, are properly sized at least in that regard. But there are some that are not, and we take this into consideration when we start developing a renovation option, because we want to correct that. We want to try to best match the educational plan, which may involve building new science labs, changing some walls, for instance. These classrooms here may be able to be salvaged as they are, because it would be expensive to tear down walls just to gain a few more square feet to meet a standard. The state generally would allow us, that's why we color them yellow, but the state generally would allow those to remain, even though they fall a little bit below their state standard. So these are some of the programmatic deficiencies that we've identified. That there are no collaborative spaces in that school. Like you said, it's just corridors and classrooms. There are no kind of resource spaces and open collaborative spaces to be able to be shared. The science classrooms in particular are small. It doesn't really support interdisciplinary work the way we know that they'd like to. Some of the tech ed spaces are outdated. There's no fitness or weight room there that they'd certainly like to have in their program. And some areas like the nursing guidance are kind of in areas that compromise their privacy, which is unfortunate. So those are kinds of things, again, that we want to address in a renovation scenario. So the next part of this first phase, as we said, is developing alternatives, alternative conceptual designs. And so on the one end of the spectrum where we look at new schools to replace the existing building, we want to think about where on the site, this is the site of the school, obviously the white roof there is the existing school. These are possible locations for a new building outside of the existing footprint, because as is going on right now at Taconic, we want to come up with a location where the existing building could continue in operation while the new one's being built. And we want to minimize the disruption, the loss of parking, or the loss of playing fields. Obviously, something has to give, but we want to minimize that and evaluate that in each of the options. And what that might look like, again, this is sort of the degree of planning that we're talking about right now. It's not really detailed, it's kind of conceptual, and this is, again, just a sample, preliminary. But if we were looking at trying to build a school in front of the existing school, we might get, here are those large spaces, the auditorium and gym, the cafeteria and classroom clusters, bus drop-off parking. Those are the kinds of planning tools that we work with in looking at various options and then coming up with a series of options to be evaluated. Likewise, in looking at renovations, here's the existing school. Here's one way to add some space. Maybe those are new science labs that can be built new, and those old inadequate science classrooms get converted to regular classrooms or some other use. And we renovate the rest of the building in phases. You have to think about, how that gets done, because like I said, the contractor needs access to the space to work on, and it's not going to be just during the summer, so it probably involves, in this kind of scenario, you could build this new space first, use that somewhat as swing space, but you probably still need some additional modular classrooms, things like that. So we think about that with these kind of renovation options. There might be some options where we do some demolition and some new construction, and the rest is renovated. Or even this far as we save the gym, we save the auditorium, and build all new academic areas. So that's kind of the range of options that we'll investigate more specifically, but kind of at this level of conceptual design right now. So when we come up with that list of options, we list them here in a format like this. It's kind of a matrix where this is the status quo kind of fix-it option we call base repair. That's without changing anything educationally, the one I just described about just fixing what's broken or deficient. And then we list all the different possibilities. This is just a sample, by the way. We don't have a specific list as yet. But what we want to do then, if we look at the blow-up here, is develop some criteria objectively to evaluate each of these options. So we can compare what are the pros and cons of each one. And again, that's in process right now. This is from another project, but how well does it meet the educational goals? That's certainly an important one. Or the site issues. Phasing or disruption is another synonym for that. How disruptive is it to implement this solution? And then cost, of course, would be listed. This would be the first time that we touch upon the cost options. And again, it would be done as a range, it would be done as sort of an order of magnitude, because the plans aren't very specific. The cost can't be very specific as yet either. But we certainly do want to know kind of on an order of magnitude, because that is an important criteria in making a decision as well. So some of the criteria that we've used previously that we're sharing with you and with the building committee right now to kind of get feedback on is, these sorts of issues. as ways of evaluating those options. One of the important things to note here too, under cost, there are a variety of different ways of looking at cost, not just a single one, because there is the total project cost, which includes the construction cost, the fees, the furniture, equipment, the contingencies, and so forth. But not all of that cost is borne by the district. Sometimes you want to consider what's the district's cost after you get state reimbursement. And that may vary in some of those options. Some things like temporary modular classrooms, that cost is included in the total project cost. It's not reimbursable by the state. So it sort of changes the equation a little bit. Not every solution is going to have the same reimbursement rate necessarily. So that's that thing that I mentioned about temporary costs. But also you want to consider operating costs too. And this term value is important as well. Particularly in these kind of scenarios, we find when you're comparing new construction versus renovation, sometimes there's a difference in long-term value that needs to be thought about. We mentioned instruction, flexibility, and so forth, and we want your input too, both tonight or in the future, if you feed it through the building committee, to get back to us as to how we can, what criteria are most important to the district here. So what we'd like to do now is move from this format, where I'm standing and lecturing, which remember was the least effective way of learning, to this method where we can sit in small groups. I think in this size, probably just two. Maybe we can gather some people around that table and some people around this table, where we can get feedback from you. Why did you come to us? What's most important on your mind? It's a free floating discussion. We'd like to know what's most important to you. What do you think some of the challenges are? It might be money. It might be, we don't think, we can deal with higher taxes or something. It's also time to give us your blue sky, crazy ideas as well, because this is about the only time you get to do that. After this gets tamped down a little bit moving forward, we might not be able to consider that swimming pool or hockey rink or something else, or whatever it might be. So we'd like to spend most of this time tonight. Now we've got about another 35 minutes, 40 minutes. We could do of that. Then we'd like to come back together and just quickly summarize what went on with the group and have time to tell you we're coming back to answer questions as well. So let's take a break, get a little refreshment, I guess. We'll bring that, and then find a seat on either side of the room. And one of us will be there at the table to record, and we can report out.
Is that your phone?
It's good.
I do. So I'm a kindergarten teacher over at Creighton. And then I have a daughter that will be going to home next year. And a daughter that will start, I guess, in sixth grade. Right, and I guess one of the things that concerns me though is she's on the education business. Do you know what I mean? That's one of my biggest concerns, is how much is the education going to be, whether you renovate,
I think
I was saying is I have a daughter who's going to be a freshman. But one of the things is I'm concerned about, like right now, there's disruption in not giving education.
That's one thing. Yes. Something's open on those things there as well.
I can see it as a need, I can see it happening.
Are you a parent?
I'm a parent of young kids.
Oh, yeah.
School and six.
That's right.
Yep.
Great. So they'll take advantage of whatever goes on.
Was there a rule that says all schools have down roofs?
Well, at least if we're gonna get flat roofs, then that's how we can get water in the
But the issue with flat roof is the
Right, exactly. So I think we have to really solve for the drainage issue. Like, solar panels are nice ladders, so we have to solve this issue.
I don't have.
Yeah, we can deal with that.
Like yesterday, I had a lot of. Just
Project, we actually had a city council who said, we went through it all.
Yeah.
In the end, but there's been.
I mean, eventually, yeah.
Well, except
So it's no big deal, but.
at the library.
Not at the computer, at the network.
There.
So I wanted to send those letters I was supposed to do that at 4 and I forgot. So I wanted to get them out first thing in the morning. So, okay, well, I got it. No, well, I got it. And then I got it soft right when I get into soft right.
Valleys have nothing else. Nightmare out of valleys.
I connect, Barracuda, get right into soft right, and then I'll check my files. But that's the only thing. But, I think this one is 7 years ago, so very impatient. Yeah, but I like anything with a choice. And I like the dog, I like, I like just picking it, I like having a singing. So can now I go to meetings and just tell Charlie, so that someone actually finds out the city.
But not to ship water, to ship water.
20 minutes before the meeting's training to charge, because I forgot.
To
At some point during the day.
And get it out.
Yeah, I like that. It worked out well.
A couple of small ones, building that way back up.
Do you have Hinsdale too? You're doing Hinsdale?
And one of the things that I found is,
Maybe by the coffee.
I think we're They actually manage some of the flat roofs, which will, once planted and in place, be aesthetically pleasing, but also bumped up their LEED certification.
Extends the life of the roof too, because it's no longer exposed to the sun, it doesn't dry out.
So it's never involved. It'll be cool to see once
Did they decide to go for air conditioning or forego the air conditioning?
No, there is air conditioning, for not every space, because there's some shop spaces with big garage doors and
Yeah.
things like that. But a lot of spaces are indoor. Again, that's partly related to community use. We've heard that sometimes too, because it's not just about the school year, but if you really want to maximize the use of the building, sometimes, particularly Central High School in the district, it becomes the hub of a lot of activity. So, but air conditioning is usually a decision point. It's not a given.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it seems like it's hotter and hotter as the kids start school in the fall, because we're starting school earlier than we used to. And then when we have snow days, we're still into June far enough that we get a few days in June too, where we really kind of, I'm gonna say, from a little kid's perspective, we lose the day. I don't know if it says true that you lose the day in high school, but I seem to remember those days being pretty much like class clown days. No, the class clowns just win. It's not that you couldn't personally concentrate, but the class clowns win.
If you have basketball,
What about it? I saw that you felt something that was out there, there was a space, a second space, so you walk in, and then there's a space.
That's generally the way entrance into the design.
And tell me about that space.
It's literally like you just walk into it. It's called a trap, or And so even to get in, the outside door is locked. You have to get buttons, and then you're cool, and you can interact with the office. If you're just dropping something off, that's fine. You can do that. But you can't go in any further. If you have a meeting or business with the school, you go into the office. That's really good. At the front door, and you try to keep all the other doors locked.
Security or safety that we're looking at for the classrooms. For example, like right now, Wahconah has their classroom door that's glass, which really isn't the best when you're looking, when you're talking about school safety and stuff like that. So is there any, well, I was just talking about also for security at the front, but also in the classrooms. Like right now, Wahconah's got the glass all around
most
the door.
of the spaces in there,
Right, but like, for example, every frame of the classroom doors, but now we all have it covered. And so no one can see into your classroom, but Wahconah, it's gotta be a lot harder because it's like, so each classroom, each person comes up, and I just, sort of like, do we do that little glass, or, I mean, I'm just asking, I know.
we have a big box space right
So I put it
Being spanning all the way across. No problem. So those are being able to come down like the structure in here.
But if it's narrow, you can still see it now.
If you do enough change to the structure, you have to do seismic raising as required. So it ends up being, that's.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Yes. Right.
Well, and the whole building too, if we said we did, say we block it out for a basketball game on Friday night, and we close it down.
Walls that can be thrusted, I haven't looked at the structure.
And pretty expensive.
I'm so and everyone's trying to cover up their windows, whatever.
That's what I feel like.
We find that the very schools change the
Covered up.
space.
Transparency is important too for a couple of reasons. You know, it still balances security, but transparency is that notion that
But we're not
administrators requirements, but other kids.
We're really how we get there. Where we want.
Where we want collaboration, we want kids to see what other kids are doing.
Very excited about positively sharing things with them. There's one of the things when is there, you can actually take it out with that side. We could pull down almost like a garage.
Okay.
I don't know, I think it was used to stop.
Yeah.
Most clusters listed here, it's common, cluster clusters, could that be, could we think about tiering that, so that it's on
We have accessibility throughout the school building staff, so to be able to provide equal experience. So those tiered places, one, not as flexible to do other things, and also to comply with accessibility requirements. So we did look at one of those that got someone into middle high school, where they do have that, a little seating area carved into that center.
Those large spaces.
Make it a little more flexibility. You might have furniture there sometimes, you might move the furniture out, you might want to do something.
There's just listening, there's another piece that is coming to my mind.
But in other places, we like to build in seating too. You don't want corridors, so the corridors become, kind of double space. That a little bit of an opportunity, just somebody sit and access their laptop or tablet, providing a college advantage.
Yes.
It's almost like a couple more waters. They hold here and
Storytelling.
Yeah, but it was more along.
Do we get more to add to the vision? You said you said everything you got to say?
Even if somebody like a gym
Speak to the
Have to pay the taxes. It's in school.
I got a lot of credibility.
I know that new construction is almost fully funded by the state. As opposed to renovation, conducive to renovation rates are here. But you were talking about, depending on the level of.
varies, starts the way around. For renovations, we actually get higher, you have to do the full thing because there's so many costs not
Yeah, there is. I figured in the end, there wasn't anything useful out of this part, or if you get here, just let it run until Yeah, exactly, just like the beginning, and just go zoom up there.
There's a few things like that.
I gotta
Unfortunately, it's very low compared to the Allen building. That's
What is the cost of
This school is very oriented. It is already doing things, other schools.
But the cost of the building.
Next, they're working on one-to-one technology.
Yeah.
Every kid's gonna have one. There are things happening inside. I'm being limited by the building.
virtual reality or something?
Yeah.
So I just.
Any other criteria when it comes time to develop, 5, 6 developments that we should apply?
Just said about TRC.
So other approaches, I don't know this level, these are just, if you don't want to pick our, air conditioning, whatever skills are done, come up with to evaluate.
That's why we, it's not, it could be that, let's say that they, as a hypothetical.
Right, so that talks about physical accessibility.
Yeah, outdoor, be like the gym.
You know, with like hearing and eyes as well, or that's all those on pages.
Probably. So, what if it's a nice percent?
Like a reverse system.
Yeah. Teacher wants somebody lanyards or something, and there's speakers in the ceiling. So the teachers speak in a normal voice. And I know my wife appreciates it. You don't have to use your teacher voice to get your percentage. You can speak, and with a lot of teachers,
And also just amplifies the person who's wearing it, not the classroom, which is different than the hearing system. That would amplify even ambient voice.
It's not as critical, but still important that everybody gets one person on the back row. We get that we just got that speaker. When I say a video, you can use those speakers to help affect the sound. This makes for the blind, it's a little hard to still things are in braille, signage, the rooms, and not too much else.
One of those guys, I always had this one correspondence, I always thought, the civil.
The outdoor light rather than just
Yeah,
being so,
energy saving,
rather than so bright with.
motion sensors turn on, but then there's also daylight sensors that can modify it. There's a lot of sunlight coming in, it turns off all the lights in the other windows, but then you keep the lights on, it's like, so we don't like skin. Like frozen foods in the light up.
As you approach, yeah.
That's the way it is. Yeah, so there's things like that. And we think about special needs students too. Making sure that those spaces are
You might have a kiosk.
sensitive, so forth.
How about vocational training? Is there any
Yeah, that's
plans to push vocational wings or additional?
Hands-on learning, because obviously there are vocational students and those students who want, a real certificate. Whether they continue not offer all those exactly as they are or not is still looked at. We've heard sources that, for some of this region, it's important that at least we have so that you don't have to work associates to get that kind of thing.
Think about our educational program. One of the
They're talking about a future where students don't stay in the same platform. They're going to change several times.
Right now, in order to go get graduated, down there. Well, one of our about collaboration. I know that we already collaborated first with last
Yeah, another way to think about those open spaces, it ties into all the concepts, it's not projects. Projects can be videos that you utilize. They can also be hands-on things to build. Problem solving.
Especially electronics or computers, satellite and robotic stuff.
So if we want that to happen.
It's not just mechanical motor. Right. They don't make operators anymore.
Right, it's computer modules. But as I said, if we want that to happen, it should be in close proximity to the classroom so that kids and teachers can access it, so that you don't have to send your kids or enroll in a course for a whole semester to do some drafting. You might have the opportunity because that space takes care of your classroom to utilize that as a resource. Some schools have what's called maker spaces, particularly in elementary, where it's just a resource where you have access to different materials to do things that you might not be able to do.
And the school will continue to have arts, like either theater or art or music, art programs in the central.
Yeah,
Essentially
I don't know
located.
if those were listed on the deficiencies that exist now, but definitely there are.
But I mean, that's always things that when budgets get tight, that's the first thing that they cut or.
We have really diverse, because we're drawing so many kids from communities, we can bring strong program offerings so that we don't have everybody having to have their choice out of the buildings. If we can't have a strong program offering, then we're still going to have difficulty in school choice. Right now, our biggest difficulty besides the aging building is just people looking at distances and driving, right? And I want that to continue to be our worst deficit problem. Because if that's our worst deficit problem, then we'll also pick up the other kids who aren't at their distance. So it'll be an even swap. If we don't have a rich program, then we'll struggle more.
That's one of those challenges of finding the most small high school.
Right.
Definitely is coming through.
Yeah, well, if it's not going to be a rich curriculum, then send me some money, send Lennox some money, and send my kids.
Grants that may enhance our.
I mean, I like the fact that other kids are doing from elementary school, but we're not going to have a diverse program when we have high school that's going to support not only what they might do locally, but going to college as well, then, their friends from the campus will do things. So there were some interesting suggestions on the board up there. One of them is a community swimming pool. Right, so you just did Putnam High School, right? The swimming pool in Putnam? No swimming pool in Putnam. Okay. No, they have a swimming pool.
They talked about doing some things on the campus.
Well, right, so it's across the road at the, at Side. So some kids at Side, so those kids still have access to the swimming pool. Do the kids at, and I don't know, do the kids at Wahconah have access to a swimming pool somewhere? Is there a different community center? Okay.
First of all, we want to four other schools become first. You were right. Then split credits.
Okay. So what's the cost of, say, what's the cost?
Swimming pools are one of those things where the operating costs over the long term are probably elevated the initial construction cost, which is still significant, but
So it's the operating cost, so once we actually move in the managed that lease and operate it as a
what
real.
you see in sometimes in cities, where the kids don't have access to a pool, they really don't want to see it. Some cities, that maybe when they're building an early vision, they might be more swimming encouraged. Part of that.
Yeah, see, it's not kind of crazy, but since I got out of the
Yeah, that's the dirt road, and, yeah. I've done that there. Yeah, cut through Alabama, you know.
by the time we get middle school, not only did the house break, so it's middle.
Like, swings, I
More like this, or you and then there's space in here.
So we are to our blue side here?
Yes.
Literally.
This isn't described, but I think we need to consider that the auditorium, she provides the community to elevate setback goes on a certain zone. We need to make it big enough, because it is used by the community, you know.
Well, right, and if we see the community in for the, and, you know, is there a way that we can bring the community in for the gymnasium and then if we're bringing the community in for the auditorium and the gymnasium, how much of a stretch is it to think that we get that? I mean,
You have to tear down something.
I mean, I'm asking, I don't know, it's not, you know, the space isn't that close to me, so I'm not that.
Really, I take a look at the science
Local organizations. I know
In Becket, during winter, it goes to donations.
I think everyone says, even in elementary schools, they go, especially people who live on this end of town, I live on the wrong end of town. People who live on this end of town, everybody goes and signs like goes up to the swim class over at CRA. That's the winter program. Parents that are, you know, they go up on time.
They have also requirements.
But there's no negative correlation.
If I could drive about 35 minutes to get here. From the Becket to getting here. That is a long, long drive.
Sometimes it's just right back.
I think there's a theater piece in Washington, there's a big piece that sits at the town hall. The parents are bringing it up in Washington. I don't know if Little Bus
To get to the bus stop, buses.
Don't move.
I know routes to go out, kids' houses.
No, we have to bring the kids to the bus stop.
Yeah.
I mean, the bus stop is a half, the bus stop is a half mile out from the house, and it's under the road. There can't be, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe that high school kids can stand out for it, but prior to high school, no way. And I'm the kind of mom who says, yes, you can sit for 5 minutes while I go to the store, because I will be able to see you. But I mean, the bigger off there,
Back like after school, like, I
Hey, Carl. 5. I assume you keep track of time. Probably be running on those minutes a lot. So that's material this time.
So what's the land bus?
I would argue.
it's okay to be honest about it. Doesn't mean it's a challenge to solve. It does mean that, it does mean that we have to be aware of it, because, sometimes the community is really passionate. Yeah, actually, in Becket town meetings, the community is really passionate about the number of kids that are still missing out. And so, I think that, how we have to be what it means to be ready to talk about why kids are still missing out, and that, you know what, it's okay.
I think what it was back then was
We don't want to encourage it, but understanding and encouraging are two different things. Yeah.
Was that fair?
The development is to think about partnering with the local colleges. Start getting some of the college coursework done for freshmen.
There is, they're doing that now, I think. I think they're doing some of that now.
Yeah.
Berkshire Community College.
Yeah.
And, Peter World.
I mean, I know a lot of the kids aren't ready, but
I think they call it articulation agreement. No, they're called articulation agreement.
When you get under the hood, especially down the old metal shop, that's a paper now. And it's like getting your own. But they kept it on, they kept it, it's still the original class of speakers. And the class.
So,
okay.
so there was all the
recap. And we'll let you go on your way on time, hopefully. Thanks again for coming. So just to recap what went on in each group briefly, in soliciting kind of what's important to the group, when we were focusing kind of on criteria first to evaluate the different offerings. The disruption of ongoing education was an important one to think about. Obviously, whether it's a renovation or a new school, to keep that in mind. You know, the loss of school choice students had to do with, I guess, attractiveness of the program, not just the building, but, you know, the attractiveness of the program. And to make sure that during the construction process, these kind of go together. We're not driving students away because families don't want to send their kids to a construction process if it's perceived that there's some loss of education because for a couple of years or something the site is undergoing disruptive kind of construction process. Then we got into a few you can see design thoughts that people wanted us to keep in mind as we move forward, which was nice. Technically and security, accessibility, you can see some of those sorts of things. Programmatically, it was important that the school continue to offer, a rich program, a diverse program, including art and music, and as well as electives it has and that sort of thing. And the tech ed side of things. We don't want to lose that moving forward. And then we had fun with a few blue sky ideas, planetarium, pool. We may or may not be able to respond to those, but we'll keep that in mind. Again, something we've heard before too about, making sure the building is easily used by the community and attractive for that kind of use, especially the auditorium and the gym, obviously. And one that I'm not sure the building can address, but we talked about the challenges of such a big district and the transportation challenges, whether that can be improved going forward or not. So those are some of the ones. We're going to record all of these thoughts from all these community meetings and incorporate them into our planning and to respond to any sort of open questions too the next time we come up. But Paul, you want to report out on your group? What you guys worked on?
We have the best group. We have some speculation about the gym and the auditorium. There's been a lot of work, a lot of sort of time and effort invested in keeping those going. Can they be kept? Can they be, and the rest of the school be sort of built around the existing gym and the auditorium? We talked a little bit about the difficulties of expanding a gym. And that has to do with structural requirements of the modern code and so forth that's changed over what was there originally. And if you don't touch the structure of the gym, you can keep using it. But if you do a major change to it, like taking down one of the walls, then you have to bring the entire gym up to today's code in terms of seismic bracing and all kinds of things. So that's just sort of background. It does lack a fitness area, and the locker rooms are totally inadequate, so that's recognized as being areas that need to be addressed. It was also mentioned that the entire facility should be part of the learning experience, and this is something we focus on when we do design. We like to say learning can happen everywhere. We look at the original corridor spaces, like in the school. There's long corridors that have like one place in the corridor where it bumps out. It's a little bit wider, and then there's like a bench looking into the courtyard. We like to do spaces like that more often, so that people in classrooms have breakout spaces where they can have like a subgroup go out and start working. But it wouldn't be a bench; it would be like more like these tables where you can work in it as a group. Question came up: are federal grants available for funding beyond what we get from the state? Is there anybody looking into federal funding for this? And they recognize, because they're in a campus and they have quite a bit of land there, and we were talking about the possibility of having a two-story building, which means there's fewer square feet of roof available for solar panels. Could there be places on the ground where you could have solar panels as well? Because there is some ground space available between the two schools that are there. And also quite a bit of questions about, can we build in the courtyards? Can the courtyard be roofed over, or can you put something in the courtyard to reduce the amount of outside land that gets used up in the addition to the building? So those are some of the questions. We really focused on a little bit on what 21st century education means in terms of spaces, talking about spaces for collaboration, and also talking about internships for the students. So they have hands-on learning and the ability to work in the community and then have the community more involved in the school educational experience as well.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. So just to leave you with one thing too, that you probably know that a lot of information about this project is available online and through social media. The group's doing a great job of getting information out there, so those are some of the ways that you can stay in touch with the project. As we say, we'll be doing this again as we move forward in the process. The next step is generating those alternatives, and before we narrow the list down to one or two, we want to have another series of these community meetings. So it might be in, say, 2 months or so, we'll be back with a series of these kinds of meetings with a little different content, but the same format to solicit feedback on the options that are being developed. As I said, we'll record all of these. Thanks for your participation tonight. We appreciate that. Enjoy the food. Thank whoever brought that. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.